The bandage on her face should have been just another detail Sante ignored. Another invisible mark on an invisible woman who cleaned his cold penthouse twice a week. But when Vanna Siciliano flinched at the sound of his approach, something ancient and protective surged through him. He'd orchestrated the disappearance of men for far less than the fear he saw swimming in her dark eyes. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's go back to hours before, where it all started. What happened to your face? His voice was deadly calm, the same tone he used before ending careers and lives. Vanna's fingers trembled as she touched the white gauze covering her cheekbone. Nothing, Mr. Costa. I fell. Sante stepped closer. She instinctively stepped back. That small movement, that reflexive retreat from his presence, ignited something in him that had nothing to do with the empire he'd built through calculated violence and cold strategy. For the first time in 20 years of controlling Los Angeles' Korean underworld, Sante Costa felt completely out of control. "Don't lie to me," he whispered, his hand lifting toward her face, hovering near the bandage without touching. The world shifted between them. Vanna's heart hammered against her ribs as she stood frozen in the middle of his pristine living room, acutely aware of every wrong detail about herself in this space. Her faded black uniform with its fraying collar, her scuffed sneakers leaving the faintest marks on marble that cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. The cheap fabric softener scent clinging to her clothes, so different from the subtle bergamot and sandalwood that always lingered around him. She didn't belong here. She'd never belonged here. "Mr. Costa, please. I need to finish my work." Her voice came out smaller than she intended, and she hated herself for it. 6 months of cleaning this penthouse, 6 months of perfecting her invisibility, and it was all crumbling because of one moment of weakness, one failure to hide the evidence of her messy, complicated life. "Your work can wait." Sante's gaze never left her face, and there was something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Something that made her skin warm and her breath catch. "How long have you been cleaning for me, Vanna?" The sound of her name in his mouth stopped her completely. In 6 months, he'd never used it. She was always Miss or nothing at all, a polite nod when their paths accidentally crossed, which was rare. He'd structured his life to avoid her, and she'd been grateful for it. 6 months, she managed. 6 months, he repeated, taking another step toward her. She forced herself to stand still this time, to not retreat again, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "Do you think I haven't noticed you?" Vanna blinked. I try to stay out of your way, Mr. Costa. That's my job." Something flickered across his face, almost like pain. He moved past her toward the floor to ceiling windows, and she could finally breathe again without inhaling his scent, without feeling the heat of his presence overwhelming her senses. "Every Tuesday and Friday at 2 o'clock, he said quietly, his back to her as he gazed out at the sprawling city below. "You arrive exactly on time. Never early, never late. You start in the kitchen, then move to the bedroom, the bathroom, and finish in here." He paused, and Vanna's pulse quickened. "You always rearrange the flowers in the entry, the ones the service delivers. You move them from the black vase to the crystal one because you think they look better with the light coming through." Vanna's mouth went dry. She thought he never noticed. She'd thought, "You hum when you think no one's listening," Sante continued, still not turning around. "Old soul songs. Aretha Franklin, Etta James. Your voice is beautiful." He turned then, and the intensity in his dark eyes pinned her in place. "You fold the kitchen towels in thirds instead of half because it fits the drawer better. You always add exactly 3 ice cubes to my water glass and leave it on the counter. You adjust the thermostat 2 degrees warmer because you think the penthouse is too cold." Heat flooded Vanna's face. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched. I changed the default temperature," he interrupted softly. "To match what you always set it to. Because you were right. It was too cold." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Vanna was afraid to interpret. Her throat tightened, and she felt the familiar sting of tears behind her eyes. No, she couldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Why are you telling me this? The question came out as barely a whisper. Sante crossed back to her, and this time she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there as he stopped just inches away. Close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the precise edge of the tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar, the way his jaw tightened as he studied her face. "Because I need you to understand something," he said, his voice low and rough. "You think you're invisible here. You think you're just another person who moves through my space without leaving a mark. But Vanna," he paused, and she saw something raw flash across his features. "You're the only real thing in my life." The words hit her like a physical blow. She shook her head, taking a step back, needing distance, needing air, needing this moment to stop before it consumed her completely. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I know you're terrified right now, and not because of me." His eyes dropped to her wrist, to the bruises she tried so hard to hide. "I know someone put their hands on you. Someone hurt you. And I know you came to work anyway because you need this job, because someone depends on you." A single tear escaped, trailing down her cheek, and Vanna quickly wiped it away. "My daughter," she heard herself say, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. "Zara, she's 6. And yes, I need this job. I need the money. So please, Mr. Costa, just let me finish my work and pretend this conversation never happened." "I can't do that." "Why not?" The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with desperation and something dangerously close to anger. "Why can't you just let me be invisible? That's what I'm good at. That's what keeps me safe." Sante's hand lifted again, and this time his fingers brushed against her jaw, feather-light, achingly gentle. Vanna's breath caught as his thumb traced just below the bandage, careful not to touch the injury itself. "Because you were never invisible to me," he said, and his voice carried a weight that made her knees weak. "Not for a single day. And seeing you hurt, seeing you afraid." His jaw clenched, and she saw rage flicker beneath the carefully controlled surface. "It makes me want to burn the world down to find whoever did this to you." Vanna closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words, by the way his touch sent electricity racing through her nerve endings, by the dangerous pull she felt toward this man who lived in shadows and violence. A man whose protection could destroy her as surely as it could save her. "The father of my daughter," she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "My ex. He came back. He wanted money, and when I said no." She gestured vaguely at her face, unable to finish the sentence. The change in Sante was immediate and terrifying. His expression went cold, empty, the same blankness she imagined he wore when he made the kind of decisions that built empires and ended lives. His hand dropped from her face, and she almost whimpered at the loss of his touch. His name, it wasn't a question. It was a demand wrapped in ice and fury. "No." Vanna grabbed his wrist, surprising both of them with the gesture. "No. I told you because you asked, because somehow you made me feel like I could. But I don't want you to do anything about it. I can handle this myself." Sante looked down at where her fingers circled his wrist, and when his eyes met hers again, they'd softened infinitesimally. "You shouldn't have to handle it yourself. It's my life, my mess." "Not anymore," he said simply, and before Vanna could process what that meant, he stepped back, creating distance between them that felt both like relief and loss. "Finish your work. We'll talk more later." It was a dismissal, gentle but absolute. Vanna nodded numbly, watching as Sante walked toward his home office, his phone already in his hand. She should have felt relieved. She should have grabbed her supplies and finished as quickly as possible and fled this penthouse, and this man who saw too much, who made her feel too much. Instead, as she turned back to her dusting, she felt the ghost of his touch on her skin and wondered what she'd just set in motion by letting Sante Costa truly see her for the first time. Vanna managed 20 minutes of work before Sante emerged from his office, his footsteps so quiet she didn't hear him approach. She was on her knees wiping down the baseboards near the dining area when his shadow fell across her. "Stop." The single word made her freeze, cloth still pressed against the pristine white trim. "Mr. Costa, I'm almost finished." "Stand up, Vanna." She rose slowly, cloth clutched in her hands like a shield. Sante stood close enough that she could see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders beneath his tailored shirt. Something had changed in the brief time he'd been in his office. The careful control he'd shown earlier had sharpened into something harder, more dangerous. "Give me your hand," he said quietly. "What?" "Your hand." The left one. Vanna's stomach dropped. She'd been so careful, keeping her sleeves pulled down, working with her injured wrist turned away from view. But somehow he knew. He always knew. "I need to finish." Sante stepped closer, and his presence alone silenced her protest. "Please," he added, and that single word of courtesy in the midst of his obvious fury somehow made it impossible to refuse. She extended her left hand, watching as he gently pushed up her sleeve. The fabric caught on the swelling, and she winced. Sante's fingers stilled immediately, his touch becoming impossibly softer as he eased the material up to her elbow. The silence that followed was deafening. 5 distinct bruises marked her wrist and forearm, dark purple against her brown skin, unmistakably the shape of fingers. Thumb on one side, for fingers on the other, as if someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave their signature in her flesh. Vanna watched Sante's face transform. The rage she'd glimpsed earlier crystallized into something arctic and absolute. His thumb traced the air just above the bruises, never touching, as if he was afraid his touch might hurt her. But his eyes promised violence. "Tell me everything." His voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. And this time, "Vanna, I need the complete truth." She should have refused, should have pulled her arm back, made an excuse, and run from this penthouse and never returned. But something in his stillness, in the way he held her damaged wrist like it was made of glass, broke through her carefully constructed walls. "His name is Marcus," she heard herself say. "Marcus Reed. We were together for 3 years. I got pregnant, and he stayed until Zara was born, then he left. Just disappeared one day. No note, no explanation. That was 6 years ago." Sante said nothing, but his fingers curled slightly, as if he was restraining himself from making fists. 2 weeks ago, he showed up at my apartment. Said he needed money. Said he had debts, dangerous people after him, and he needed $10,000. A bitter laugh escaped her. "I clean houses, Mr. Costa. I make enough to keep my daughter fed and our lights on. I don't have $10,000. What did he do?" The question was simple, but the weight behind it made Vanna's throat tighten. "He said if I didn't find the money, he'd take Zara. Said he was her father, that he had rights, that he could make my life hell." The memory made her voice shake. "I told him to leave. He grabbed my wrist, twisted it, said I had 1 week to get him the money, or he'd come back and make me regret ever thinking I could keep his daughter from him. In your face." Vanna touched the bandage self-consciously. "He came back yesterday. I still didn't have the money. He got angry, said I was lying, that I must be hiding it somewhere. He pushed me against the kitchen counter. The edge caught my cheekbone. Sante released her wrist carefully, as if afraid it might shatter, and stepped back. The space between them felt charged, electric with an energy that made the air hard to breathe. When he spoke again, his voice carried a finality that chilled her blood. "Where does he live?" "Mr. Costa." "Where does he live?" "I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. He just shows up whenever he wants." Vanna wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the penthouse. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't your problem. I'll figure something out. Maybe I can get a loan, or—" "No, no." Sante turned to face her fully, and the expression on his face was unlike anything she'd seen before. It was fury and determination and something else, something that looked almost like pain. "You will not give that man a single dollar," he said, each word precise and sharp. "You will not negotiate with him. You will not see him again. You can't just—" "I can." He moved toward her again, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You told me his name. You told me what he did. That's all I need." Understanding crashed over Vanna like ice water. No, Sante, no. You can't. Whatever you're thinking, you can't do that. It was the first time she'd used his first name, and something flickered in his eyes at the sound of it. He put his hands on you. He threatened your daughter. He made you afraid. Sante's voice dropped even lower. Men who hurt women, who threaten children, they don't get second chances in my world, Vanna. I don't want you to hurt him. The words came out desperate, rushed. I don't want that on my conscience. I don't want to owe you something I can never repay. You won't owe me anything. That's not how this works. Vanna gestured around the penthouse, at the visible wealth, at the invisible power that radiated from him. Men like you don't help people like me without expecting something in return. I've been invisible my whole life, Mr. Costa. I know how the world works. Sante caught her gesturing hand midair, his fingers circling her wrist just above the bruises, his touch gentle despite the intensity burning in his eyes. You're wrong, he said softly. About all of it. You're not invisible. You never were. And I don't want anything from you except the knowledge that you're safe, that your daughter is safe, that when you come here to work, you're not carrying injuries from a man who should have protected you instead of hurting you. Vanna's vision blurred with unshed tears. Why do you care? The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his thumb moving in small circles against the inside of her wrist, right where her pulse hammered frantically. I don't know, he finally admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice nearly undid her. I spent 20 years building walls, keeping distance, making sure I never cared about anything or anyone enough to be weak. And then you walked into my life, rearranging my flowers and humming Etta James, and suddenly, he stopped, jaw clenching. Suddenly I care, and that means keeping you safe. By doing something violent. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Vanna pulled her hand free, needing the space to think, to breathe, to process what was happening. And if I say no, if I tell you to stay out of it, Sante's expression didn't change. That threat ends today, Vanna, with or without your permission. But I'd rather have it. I'd rather you trusted me. I don't even know you. Then get to know me. The words came out almost like a plea. Have dinner with me. Tonight. Bring your daughter if you want. Let me prove I'm not just the monster you think I am. I never said you were a monster. You didn't have to. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But that man who hurt you, you should be afraid of monsters. Because that's exactly what's coming for him. The promise hung in the air between them, terrible and absolute. Vanna knew she should protest again, should refuse, should put distance between herself and this man who could destroy her life as easily as he promised to protect it. But when she looked into his dark eyes, she saw something that terrified her more than his fury. She saw certainty. She saw inevitability. She saw a man who had already made his decision and would move heaven and earth to keep his word. That threat ends today, Sante repeated, softer this time. Not a promise, a vow. And despite every instinct screaming at her to run, Vanna found herself nodding, accepting the protection of a man whose very existence was danger, and wondering if safety had ever felt this much like falling. Sante's driver arrived at Vanna's apartment complex at exactly 6 o'clock. She watched from her third-floor window as the black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, sleek and expensive and completely out of place among the dented Hondas and rusted pickup trucks that lined the street. Mama, is that for us? Zara pressed her face against the glass, her dark eyes wide with wonder. Yes, baby. Vanna smoothed down her daughter's carefully braided hair, the only nice thing about either of them tonight. Vanna wore her single good dress, a navy blue number she'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago for a funeral. Zara had on her church clothes, a pink cotton dress with a small stain near the hem that Vanna had tried unsuccessfully to remove. They didn't belong in a Mercedes. They didn't belong at whatever high-end restaurant Sante owned. But he'd called 2 hours ago, his voice leaving no room for argument. 6 o'clock. Bring Zara, or whatever you're comfortable in. Now, as Vanna locked their apartment door and guided Zara down the narrow stairwell, she wondered what kind of madness had possessed her to agree to this. The driver was a silent, efficient man who opened the door without comment, his eyes carefully averted as Vanna helped Zara into the leather interior. The car smelled like new money and subtle cologne, and Vanna's stomach twisted with anxiety. "Mama, it's so soft," Zara whispered, running her small hands over the seat. "Like clouds. Remember your manners, baby. Don't touch anything you don't need to." The drive to Koreatown took 20 minutes through evening traffic. Vanna spent the entire time fighting the urge to tell the driver to turn around, to take them home where they belonged. But then she'd remember the bruises on her wrist, the fear in Zara's eyes when Marcus had shown up at their door, and she'd force herself to stay still. The restaurant was called Solace, and it occupied the entire ground floor of a glass building that seemed to glow from within. The driver pulled up to a private entrance at the side, and suddenly Sante was there, opening the door himself before the driver could move. He'd changed from his earlier business attire into black slacks and a charcoal sweater that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. His hair was slightly less styled, a few strands falling across his forehead in a way that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. "Vanna," his eyes swept over her, and something warm flickered in their depths. "You look beautiful." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I look like someone who shops at Goodwill." "You look like someone who doesn't need expensive clothes to be stunning." He crouched down to Zara's level as she emerged from the car, her small hand gripping Vanna's tightly. "And you must be Zara. Your mother told me about you. She says you're the smartest 6-year-old in Los Angeles." Zara pressed closer to Vanna's leg, suddenly shy, but Vanna could see the pleased smile tugging at her daughter's lips. "I'm Sante," he continued, his voice gentle in a way Vanna had never heard before. "I'm a friend of your mother's. I own this restaurant, and I was hoping you might help me test the dessert menu tonight. I can't decide which chocolate cake is best, and I think I need an expert opinion." That broke through Zara's shyness. "I'm very good at tasting chocolate cake." "I thought you might be." Sante stood, offering his hand to the little girl. After a moment's hesitation and a glance at her mother, Zara took it. Vanna's throat tightened at the sight of her daughter's small brown hand in Sante's larger one, at the careful way he adjusted his stride to match Zara's shorter steps as they walked toward the entrance. Inside, the restaurant was elegant in a way that made Vanna's breath catch. Soft lighting, dark wood, tables set with what had to be real crystal and china. A hostess in a sleek black dress greeted them immediately, but her eyes went straight to Sante. "Mr. Costa, your private dining room is ready." They were led through the main dining area, past tables of wealthy patrons who looked like they belonged in this world of starched linens and wine lists. Vanna caught glimpses of their curious glances, the way their eyes lingered on her discount dress, on Zara's slightly too small shoes, on the obvious disparity between her and the man leading them through his domain. The private dining room was smaller, intimate, with a single table set for 3 and windows overlooking the glittering city. Sante pulled out a chair for Zara first, treating her with the same courtesy he'd shown Vanna, before holding out Vanna's chair. "I've asked the chef to prepare a selection," he said, settling into his own seat across from them. "If there's anything you don't like, just say so." "We're not picky eaters, Mr. Costa," Vanna said quietly. "Sante," he corrected, his eyes finding hers. "Please." A server appeared with water and what looked like fresh lemonade for Zara. Then came the food, course after course of dishes Vanna couldn't have afforded in a year of saving. Perfectly seared fish, tender beef, vegetables that tasted like they'd been picked that morning. Zara's eyes grew wider with each plate. "Mama, this is the best food I've ever eaten," she whispered, and Vanna felt tears prick her eyes because it was true, and because her baby girl deserved to eat like this every day instead of the boxed macaroni and chicken nuggets that were their usual fare. "I'm glad you like it," Sante said, and when Vanna looked at him, she found him watching Zara with an expression she couldn't quite name. Something soft, something almost wistful. "Do you have kids, Mr. Sante?" Zara asked around a bite of perfectly roasted potato. "No, I don't." "Why not?" "Zara," Vanna interjected. "That's rude." "It's all right." Sante's smile was gentle. "I suppose I never found the right person to have a family with. My work takes up a lot of my time." "What do you do?" "I run businesses. Restaurants like this one. Buildings. I help people with problems. Like a superhero." Sante's laugh was unexpected and genuine, transforming his face into something lighter, more open. Not exactly, but I try to help when I can. You're helping my mama. Zara's voice was matter-of-fact, innocent. She's been scared lately, but she smiled when she got ready tonight. I haven't seen her smile in a long time. The air seemed to leave the room. Vanna felt Sante's eyes on her, heavy with meaning, but she couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. Her daughter's words hung there, exposing truths Vanna had tried so hard to hide. Your mother is a very strong woman, Sante said softly. The strongest I've ever met. And I'm honored that she's giving me the chance to know both of you. Zara beamed at him. Are you going to marry my mama? Zara, Vanna's voice came out strangled. He's not. But Sante didn't look uncomfortable. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his attention focused entirely on the little girl who'd asked the question with such guileless curiosity. Would you like it if I did? Zara considered this seriously, tilting her head. Will you make her smile more? Every day, I promise. And will you keep us safe from the bad man who made Mama cry? Vanna's heart stopped. She'd thought Zara hadn't known, had believed her daughter was asleep when Marcus had last come by. But children saw everything, knew everything, even when you try to protect them. Sante's expression went very still, very focused. Yes, he said, and the word carried the weight of a sacred oath. I will keep you both safe. Always. Zara nodded, satisfied. Then okay, you can marry her. Baby, it doesn't work like that. Vanna managed, her voice shaking somewhere between laughter and tears. Your mother's right, Sante agreed, though his eyes never left Vanna's face. I'd have to ask her first, and she'd have to want to say yes. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. Do you think she might? Someday, he was asking Zara, but the question was for Vanna. She could feel it in the weight of his gaze, in the careful way he waited for an answer that would tell him everything he needed to know about where this night might lead. Zara looked between them, then smiled the bright, knowing smile of a child who understood more than she should. Yeah, she said simply. I think she might, because she looks at you the same way she looks at me. Like you're something precious. Vanna couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only sit there as her 6-year-old daughter exposed every secret her heart had been trying to keep, laying them bare in a private dining room that suddenly felt more intimate than any space she'd ever occupied. Sante reached across the table, his hand open, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. After a moment's hesitation, Vanna placed her hand in his, feeling his fingers close around hers with a gentleness that belied the strength she knew he possessed. Thank you, he said quietly. Both of you, for giving me this. We haven't given you anything, Vanna whispered. You've given me everything, Sante corrected. You've given me hope that I could have this. A family, a home, something real beyond the empire and the power and the emptiness. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. You've given me a dream I didn't know I was allowed to have. And sitting there, with her daughter happily eating the best food of her young life, and this dangerous, complicated man holding her hand like she was something worth treasuring, Vanna felt the last of her resistance crumble. She was falling. She'd been falling since the moment he'd touched her face and seen past her invisibility. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of where she might land. The driver took Zara home first. She'd fallen asleep against Vanna's shoulder halfway through the drive, her belly full and her face peaceful in a way Vanna hadn't seen in weeks. When they pulled up to the apartment complex, Sante's driver helped carry her daughter upstairs while Sante waited in the hallway, keeping a respectful distance as Vanna tucked Zara into bed. Mama, Zara mumbled, half asleep. I like him. He's nice. I know, baby. Sleep now. He'll keep us safe. I can tell. Vanna kissed her daughter's forehead, her heart aching with a mixture of hope and terror. Sweet dreams, love. When she emerged from Zara's tiny bedroom, she expected to find the hallway empty. Expected Sante would have returned to the car, maintaining the distance that men like him usually kept from places like this. Instead, he stood just inside her open apartment door, his expensive clothes and commanding presence completely incongruous against her peeling wallpaper and secondhand furniture. "I should go," he said quietly, but he didn't move. "You should," Vanna agreed, but she didn't move either. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they hadn't said at dinner, everything Zura's innocent questions had exposed. Vanna was acutely aware of how small her apartment was, how the living room and kitchen were really just one cramped space, how the couch sagged in the middle and the coffee table was scratched from years of use. "This is my life," she heard herself say. "This apartment that's too small. That job cleaning other people's homes, stretching every dollar until it screams. This is who I am, Sante, not someone who belongs in private dining rooms or Mercedes or with men who own empires. I know who you are." "No, you don't." Vanna wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the evening. "You see some version of me that you've built in your head. The woman who hums Etta James and arranges your flowers. But that's just pieces. You don't know what it's like to choose between paying the electric bill or buying your daughter new shoes. You don't know what it's like to be so tired you can barely stand, but you have to keep working because there's no other choice." Sante stepped further into the apartment, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "You're right. I don't know what that's like. I grew up with nothing and clawed my way to everything, but my path was different. Darker, more violent." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But I know what it's like to be so lonely that you forget what another person's genuine touch feels like. I know what it's like to be surrounded by people who want something from you but never see you. I know what it's like to wake up in a penthouse that costs more than most people make in a year and feel absolutely nothing." The rawness in his voice made Vanna's throat tight. "Until you," he continued, moving closer. "Until I started counting the hours until Tuesday. Until I started leaving my office door open just to hear you humming in the other room. Until I realized the only time my penthouse felt like anything other than an expensive cage was when you were in it." "That's not real," Vanna whispered. "That's just loneliness. Proximity. You could have that with anyone." "No." The word was absolute. "I've had beautiful women in that penthouse. Women who wanted my money, my power, my connections. Women who knew exactly how to be seen." He stopped just inches from her. "But they were all performing, all playing a role. You're the only person who's ever been real there. The only person who treated my space like it mattered, who moved through it like you cared about more than what you could take from it. I'm your maid, Sante. Caring about your space is literally my job. Is folding my towels in thirds your job? Is setting my thermostat warmer? Is leaving my water glass with exactly 3 ice cubes?" His hand lifted, hovering near her face in that now familiar gesture, seeking permission. "Is making me feel like I'm human instead of just useful your job." Vanna closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. "I'm scared. Of me, of what you represent, of the world you live in." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "You talk about handling Marcus like it's nothing. You run businesses that exist in shadows. You have drivers and private dining rooms and the kind of power that makes people afraid. And I'm just..." Her voice broke. "I'm just a woman trying to keep her daughter safe. And getting involved with you feels like the opposite of safe." "You're right." Sante's admission surprised her. "Nothing about my life is safe. Nothing about who I am or what I do is simple or clean. I've made choices that would horrify you. I've done things that keep me awake at night." His thumb finally touched her cheek, brushing away a tear with devastating gentleness. "But Vanna, you make me want to be better. You make me want to find a way out of the shadows. You make me feel like maybe there's a version of my life that isn't just about power and control and emptiness." "I can't save you," she whispered. "I can barely save myself. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to let me try to be worthy of you." His other hand came up, cradling her face between his palms. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that what I feel isn't just loneliness or proximity. That when I see you, I see everything I didn't know I needed. Everything real in a world that's mostly illusion." Vanna's hands lifted of their own accord, settling on his chest, feeling his heart beating fast beneath the expensive fabric of his sweater. "What do you feel?" The question hung between them, fragile and necessary. "Alive," Sante said simply. For the first time in 20 years, I feel alive. I feel like maybe there's a reason I survived everything I survived, built everything I built. Like maybe it was all leading to this moment, to you, to the possibility of something beyond what I've known. I'm terrified, Vanna admitted. So am I. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, and she could feel his breath against her lips. I'm terrified that you'll realize I'm not worth the risk, that you'll decide your life is better without the complications I bring, that I'll lose this before I've even had a chance to show you what we could be. And what could we be? Everything, he breathed. A family, a home, a life where you never have to choose between electric bills and shoes, where your daughter grows up safe and loved, where you're seen and cherished every single day. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, where I get to wake up next to you and remember what it feels like to be human. Vanna's hands fisted in his sweater. You're asking for a lot. I know. You're asking me to trust you with everything. I know. You're asking me to believe that a man who lives in violence can build something gentle. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Just raw, vulnerable honesty. Vanna studied his face, seeing the truth written there. The longing, the fear, the desperate hope that mirrored her own. This man who could command empires was standing in her cramped apartment, confessing that she made him feel alive, and every instinct she'd honed over 28 years of survival was screaming at her to run. But a quieter voice, one that sounded like possibility, was whispering something different. I count the hours too, she finally said, her voice barely audible. Until Tuesday, until Friday, until I can see you again, even if it's just a glimpse, even if we don't speak. Her fingers uncurled, spreading flat against his chest. You're not the only one who's been lonely. You're not the only one who's been scared of wanting something they don't think they deserve. Sante's eyes closed, and she watched something like relief wash over his features. Vanna, I don't know if this is smart. I don't know if we're making a terrible mistake. But I know that for the first time since Zara was born, I want something for myself. Something beyond just surviving. She took a shaky breath. I want to see where this goes. I want to believe that maybe we could be everything. His hands tightened on her face, and when his eyes opened, they were bright with emotion she'd never expected to see from a man like him. I'll spend every day proving you made the right choice. You better, she said, managing a trembling smile. Because I'm trusting you with everything I have. My safety, my daughter's safety, my heart. I won't fail you, Sante promised, and the words carried the weight of a vow. I swear on everything I am, everything I've built, I won't fail you. Then he kissed her, soft and careful and achingly tender, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. And Vanna kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into that moment of connection. All her fear, all her hope, all the desperate, terrifying possibility of choosing love over safety. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vanna rested her head against his chest and listened to his racing heartbeat. Stay, she whispered, just for a little while, just so I know this is real. Sante's arms came around her, holding her close. As long as you want me here. They stood like that in her tiny living room, two people from different worlds finding unexpected shelter in each other. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Vanna felt something dangerously close to hope. Vanna's phone rang at 7:30 the next morning, shattering the fragile peace she'd found in sleep. She fumbled for it on her nightstand, squinting at the unfamiliar number, her body still warm from dreams of strong arms and whispered promises. Hello, is this Vanna Siciliano? The voice was professional, female, with an edge that immediately triggered Vanna's survival instincts. Yes. Who's calling? This is Detective Sarachan with the Los Angeles Police Department. I need to ask you some questions regarding Marcus Reed. Do you have a few minutes to talk? The warmth drained from Vanna's body, replaced by ice-cold dread. She sat up slowly, glancing at Zara's closed bedroom door to ensure her daughter was still asleep. What about Marcus? Mr. Reed filed a harassment complaint yesterday afternoon. He claims you've been threatening him, demanding money, and that you've made several attempts to contact him despite his requests that you stop. A pause. He also claims you've been using your relationship with a known criminal associate to intimidate him. Vanna's hand tightened around the phone. None of that is true. Miss Siciliano, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to give a statement. Mr. Reed has provided some concerning allegations, including claims that you're involved with individuals connected to organized crime. Given that you have a minor child in your care, we need to investigate these claims thoroughly. The words hit like physical blows. Child Protective Services. Investigation. They were going to look into her life, into Zara's safety, because Marcus had twisted everything into a weapon against her. Because Sante had done exactly what he'd promised. When do you need me to come in? Vanna's voice sounded distant, hollow. Today, if possible. Say 10 o'clock. I'll text you the address. I'll be there. The detective ended the call, and Vanna sat frozen on her bed, watching the morning light filter through her thin curtains. Her phone buzzed with the promised address, but she couldn't bring herself to look at it yet. He'd done something. Sante had done something to Marcus, something that had scared him enough to go to the police with lies, to weaponize the system against her. And now everything she'd worked so hard to protect was at risk. Her phone rang again. Sante's name lit up the screen. She almost didn't answer, almost let it ring through to voicemail so she could have more time to process, to think, to figure out how to handle this. But anger was already building beneath her fear, hot and righteous and demanding release. What did you do? No greeting, no pretense. A pause on the other end. Good morning to you too. Don't. Her voice shook. Don't play games with me right now. What did you do to Marcus? Another pause, longer this time. When Sante spoke again, his voice had shifted into something careful, controlled. I sent some people to talk to him, to make it clear that he needed to leave you alone. Talk to him. Vanna laughed, bitter and sharp. Right, just talk. And now I have a detective calling me, telling me I need to come to the police station to give a statement because Marcus filed a harassment complaint against me. He's claiming I'm threatening him, that I'm involved with organized crime, that I'm using dangerous people to intimidate him. Silence. Say something, Vanna demanded, her voice rising. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me this isn't because of what you did. He was never supposed to go to the police. Sante's voice was tight with barely controlled fury, but it wasn't directed at her. That wasn't part of the plan. The plan. Vanna stood, pacing her small bedroom, free hand pressed against her forehead. You had a plan. You sent people to threaten a man who's already desperate and volatile, and you didn't think he might retaliate the only way he could? By going to the police and making me look like the criminal? Vanna, they mentioned Child Protective Services, Sante. They're going to investigate whether Zara is safe with me, whether I'm fit to be her mother. Because of you. Because you couldn't just let me handle this my own way. Your way wasn't keeping you safe. The words detonated between them. My way was keeping my daughter out of the system. Vanna's voice cracked. My way was making sure that no matter how bad things got, I didn't give anyone a reason to question whether I could take care of her. And now, because you decided to be my savior without asking if I wanted to be saved, I could lose her. That won't happen. I won't let it happen. You can't control everything, Sante. You can't just wave your hand and make the police go away. This is real. This is my life, my daughter's life, and your money and power don't mean anything when they're looking at a single mother with connections to the Korean Mafia. She heard him exhale, heard the sound of movement like he was pacing too. I'll fix this. How? How are you going to fix this? Vanna's anger was giving way to something worse, to a bone-deep terror that made her voice shake. Are you going to intimidate the detective too? Make the complaint disappear? That'll just prove Marcus's claims. That'll just make everything worse. Then tell me what you want me to do. I want you to have not done this in the first place. The words burst out of her, loud enough that she immediately glanced at Zara's door, praying her daughter hadn't woken. She lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. I want you to have listened when I said I could handle it. I want you to have respected that this was my decision to make, not yours. He hurt you. The rawness in Sante's voice cut through her anger. He put his hands on you. He threatened your daughter. And you expected me to just, what? Stand by and let him keep terrorizing you? Yes. If that's what I asked you to do, then yes. Vanna pressed her palm against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Sante. You don't get to take over my life just because you have feelings for me. That's not protection. That's control. The silence that followed was suffocating. Is that what you think I'm doing? His voice had gone quiet, dangerous. Controlling you? What else would you call it? You made a decision about my life, about my safety, about how to handle my problems, and you did it without consulting me, without caring what I wanted. Tears were streaming down Vanna's face now, hot and angry. And now I have to go to a police station and explain why Marcus is claiming I'm involved with criminals. I have to sit there and lie or tell the truth, and either way, I look guilty of something. I was trying to protect you. I know. The fight drained out of her all at once, leaving only exhaustion and fear. I know you were. But Sante, your kind of protection comes with consequences I can't afford. Every time you try to fix something for me, you're pulling me deeper into your world. And your world isn't safe for someone like me, for someone like Zara. So what are you saying? Vanna closed her eyes, the words she needed to say sitting like stones on her tongue. I'm saying I need time. I need space to handle this situation without your influence making it worse. I need to figure out if being with you is worth risking everything I have. Vanna, please. I have to go. I have to figure out what I'm going to tell the detective. What I'm going to say to protect my daughter from the fallout of your good intentions. She wiped at her tears, trying to steady her voice. Don't call me. Don't come to my apartment. Just give me space to deal with this. I love you. The words stopped her breath. 3 words she desperately wanted to hear and absolutely couldn't handle right now. Don't, she whispered. Don't say that when everything is falling apart. I'm saying it because everything is falling apart. Because I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever you decide, that's real. What I feel for you is real. Vanna swallowed against the sob building in her chest. If you love me, then respect what I'm asking for. Give me space. Let me handle this my way. A long, painful pause. Okay, but Vanna, I meant what I said. I'll fix this. However I have to, whatever it takes. I'll make sure this doesn't touch you or Zara. Just don't make it worse, she said, and ended the call before he could respond. She stood in her bedroom, phone clutched in her shaking hand, and felt everything she'd allowed herself to hope for last night crumble into dust. Sante's touch was still a ghost on her skin, his whispered promises still echoing in her ears, but reality had reasserted itself with brutal efficiency. This was why she'd kept herself invisible, why she'd never reached for more than survival. Because the moment you let someone see you, the moment you let them in, they could destroy everything you'd worked so hard to protect, even if they were trying to save you. Especially then, Zara's door opened, and her daughter emerged, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mama? Why are you crying? Vanna quickly wiped her face, forcing a smile she didn't feel. Just some grown-up stuff, baby. Nothing for you to worry about. But as she pulled her daughter into a hug, holding her close and breathing in the simple innocence of her shampoo, Vanna knew that everything she'd feared about Sante's world was coming true, and she had no idea how to protect her daughter from it. The police station interview took 3 hours. 3 hours of sitting in a stark room that smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee, answering Detective Chen's carefully worded questions while trying not to incriminate herself or Sante. 3 hours of explaining that yes, Marcus was her ex, yes, he'd been violent, no, she hadn't threatened him, no, she didn't know anyone in organized crime. The lie tasted like ash. Detective Chun had been professional, almost sympathetic, but Vanna could see the doubt in her eyes. Could see her making notes that would probably end up in a file somewhere, a file that could be used to question her fitness as a mother. We'll be in touch if we need anything else, the detective had said at the end, handing Vanna a business card. And Miss Siciliano, if you are involved with dangerous people, even peripherally, I'd strongly encourage you to reconsider those associations. For your daughter's sake. Vanna had taken her daughter to her neighbor's apartment after that, paying Mrs. Park $20 she couldn't spare to watch Zara for a few hours. Then she'd taken 2 buses across the city to Century City, her anger building with every mile. She'd asked him for space. She'd asked him not to contact her. But there were things that couldn't wait, things that needed to be said face to face, even if it meant violating the distance she demanded. The building's doorman recognized her, nodding her through without question. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt eternal, her reflection in the polished mirrors showing a woman who looked hollowed out, exhausted, pushed past her breaking point. The elevator opened directly into Sante's foyer. He was standing at the windows, phone pressed to his ear, his posture rigid with tension. He turned at the sound of the elevator, and something flickered across his face when he saw her. Relief. Hope. Then, when he registered her expression, resignation. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, ending the call without waiting for a response. "Vanna, don't." She stepped into the penthouse, and the space that had once felt cold now just felt empty. Wrong. Like a stage set for a life that could never be real. "I asked you not to contact me, but I didn't say I wouldn't contact you. And we need to talk. Really talk. Not on the phone where I can hang up when it gets too hard." Sante set his phone down carefully on the glass coffee table. He looked like he hadn't slept, his hair less styled than usual, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for too long. "How did it go?" "With the police." "How do you think it went?" Vanna's voice was sharp. "I spent 3 hours lying to a detective, telling her I don't know anyone in organized crime, while she looked at me like she knew I was full of it. She all but said they're going to look into whether Zara is safe with me. Whether I'm making good choices as a parent. I'm handling Marcus. That's the problem." The words exploded out of her. "You're handling it. You're making decisions. You're using your connections and your power and your money to fix my problems, and you're doing it without asking me what I want, without caring about the consequences." Sante's jaw tightened. "The consequence is that he leaves you alone, that he stops threatening you and your daughter. That's all I care about." "Well, you should care about more than that." Vanna gestured around the penthouse, at the expensive art and designer furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city he practically owned. "You should care that every time you use your power for me, you're tying me closer to your world. You're making me complicit in things I want no part of. You're taking away my choices. I'm trying to protect you. I never asked for your protection." Her voice cracked, tears burning behind her eyes. "I asked you to let me handle things my way. I asked you to respect my decisions. But you couldn't do that, could you? Because men like you don't ask permission. You don't wait for consent. You just take action and expect everyone else to deal with the fallout." Something dangerous had flashed in Sante's eyes. Men like me. Yes, men who are used to controlling everything and everyone around them. Men who think love means possession. Vanna took a step closer, needing him to understand, needing him to see what he was doing. "You said you wanted to be better. You said I made you want to change. But the first time something threatened me, you reverted to exactly who you've always been. Someone who solves problems with intimidation and force. What was I supposed to do, Vanna? Let him keep hurting you? Let him keep coming back until he actually followed through on his threats? You were supposed to talk to me." The tears spilled over now, hot trails down her cheeks. "You were supposed to ask me what I wanted, to give me options, to treat me like a partner instead of something fragile that needed to be locked away and protected." Sante moved toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't. If you touch me right now, I'll lose my train of thought. I'll let myself believe that your touch makes everything okay, and it doesn't. It can't." He stopped, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "Then say what you came here to say." Vanna took a shaking breath. "I love you." The words seemed to hit him physically. His expression shifted, softened, and she saw desperate hope bloom in his dark eyes. "But I'm terrified of you," she continued, and watched that hope fracture. "Not because I think you'd hurt me. I know you wouldn't. I'm terrified because loving you means accepting your world. It means exposing Zara to danger. It means lying to police detectives and worrying that Child Protective Services might show up at my door. It means living with the knowledge that the man I love solves problems by sending people to threaten and intimidate. I would never let anything happen to you or Zara. You can't promise that." Vanna's voice broke completely. "You can't control everything, Sante. You think you can, but you can't. And what happens when your world catches up to us? When your enemies decide the best way to hurt you is through me and my daughter. When being with you puts a target on our backs that you can't protect us from. I die before I let anyone touch you. That's not reassuring. The words came out as almost a shout. Don't you understand? I don't want you to die for me. I don't want you to live in a world where that's even a possibility. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I want a normal life. I want Sunday mornings and parent-teacher conferences and worrying about nothing more dangerous than whether we can afford new winter coats. I can give you that. No, you can't. Not while you're who you are. Not while you run your empire and make your deals and have connections to people who solve problems with violence. Vanna wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold in the warm penthouse. And I can't ask you to give that up. I can't ask you to walk away from everything you've built, everything you are, just to be with me. Sante was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw. What if I want to? What? Walk away. From all of it. He moved closer, slowly, like approaching something wild that might bolt. What if I've been looking for a reason to get out for years, and you finally gave me one? Vanna shook her head. You can't just walk away from the life you lead. It doesn't work that way. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it'll take time, strategy, careful extraction from certain obligations. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. But Vanna, if the choice is between my empire and you, there's no choice. There's only you. You don't mean that. You're just saying it because you're scared of losing me. Yes, I'm scared of losing you. I'm terrified of it. His hands lifted, hovering near her face in that gesture that had become so familiar. But that doesn't make it less true. I meant what I said in your apartment. You made me want to be better. And better isn't just treating you well while I continue to live in shadows. Better is finding a way to give you the life you deserve. I need time, Vanna whispered, even as part of her wanted to lean into his almost touch, wanted to let him hold her and promise her everything would be okay. I need time to think, to figure out if I can really do this. If I can really risk everything for a man whose world is so different from mine. How much time? I don't know. Days. Maybe weeks. However long it takes for me to be sure. She finally met his eyes, seeing the pain there, the fear that mirrored her own. I need to know that if I choose you, I'm not just choosing the dream you've shown me. I need to know I'm choosing reality, with all its complications and dangers and impossible compromises. Sante's hands dropped. And if you decide I'm not worth the risk, then I walk away. I go back to being invisible. I keep myself and Zara safe in the only way I know how. The thought felt like tearing herself in half, but she forced herself to say it. I survive, like I always have. You're more than that. You're more than just surviving. Maybe. A sad smile tugged at her lips. But surviving is what I'm good at. And right now, with police detectives looking into my life and my ex filing false complaints and child protective services potentially hovering in my future, surviving is all I can focus on. Sante nodded slowly, and she watched him visibly gather control, watched the mask of composure settle back into place, even though she could still see the cracks beneath. I'll fix the Marcus situation. I'll make the complaint disappear, make him disappear if necessary, and I'll do it without making your situation worse. That's a promise. And then I wait, however long you need. I wait for you to decide if I'm worth the risk. His voice was steady, but she could hear the fragility beneath. Because, Vanna, you're worth every risk to me. You're worth changing everything. She wanted to believe him, wanted to close the distance between them and let him hold her and pretend the last 24 hours hadn't happened. But the detective's card was still in her pocket. Marcus's accusations still hung over her head, and the reality of what loving Sante Costa meant was too heavy to ignore. I should go. Zara's with my neighbor. I need to pick her up. Sante didn't try to stop her as she turned toward the elevator. Didn't make promises or pleas. Just stood there in his empty penthouse, looking more alone than she'd ever seen him. Vanna, he called as the elevator doors started to close. She looked up, meeting his gaze one last time. I love you. Whatever you decide, that won't change. The doors closed on his words, and Vanna leaned against the polished wall, letting the tears come freely as the elevator carried her away from the man who'd seen her, loved her, and might destroy everything she'd worked so hard to build. The first day, without Sante, Vanna convinced herself she'd made the right choice. She went through her normal routine with mechanical precision. Wake up, get Zara ready for school, take 2 buses to her first cleaning job, then another bus to the second, then home to make dinner and help with homework. Normal. Safe. Exactly what her life had been before a Korean Mafia boss had noticed a bandage on her face and decided she was worth seeing. The second day, she realized her hands moved through the motions of cleaning other people's homes while her mind stayed trapped in that penthouse, replaying their last conversation on an endless loop. His promise to wait. His confession of love. The look on his face when the elevator doors had closed between them. By the third day, the hollow feeling had settled deep in her chest, a physical ache that no amount of distraction could ease. She'd stopped humming while she worked, stopped rearranging flowers, stopped doing all the small things that made spaces feel cared for rather than just cleaned. Her supervisor at Elite Cleaning Services noticed. "Vanna, is everything all right? Mrs. Chun called to say you seemed distracted during your shift yesterday." "I'm fine, just tired." But she wasn't fine. She was hollow, like something essential had been carved out of her, and the empty space left behind echoed with every breath. The fourth day was the worst. Vanna picked up Zara from after-school care, her daughter unusually quiet during the bus ride home. When they got to their apartment, Zara dropped her backpack by the door and turned to look at her mother with those 2 knowing eyes that 6-year-olds shouldn't have. "Mama, why don't you smile anymore?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. Vanna knelt down to her daughter's level, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "What do you mean, baby? I smile all the time." "No, you don't." Zara's small hand touched Vanna's cheek, gentle and concerned. "Not the real kind. Not the kind you had when we went to dinner with Mr. Sante. You look sad now, like when Daddy left." The comparison made Vanna's throat close. She pulled Zara into a hug, breathing in the scent of her daughter's shampoo, trying to hold herself together. "I'm just dealing with some grown-up stuff. It's nothing for you to worry about." "Is it because of the bad man? Did Mr. Sante not make him go away?" Vanna pulled back, studying her daughter's face. "What makes you think that?" "Because you were happy when Mr. Sante said he'd keep us safe, and now you're sad again." Zara's bottom lip trembled. "Did he lie? Is the bad man coming back?" "No, baby. No." Vanna smoothed her daughter's braids, her heart breaking at the fear in those young eyes. "Mr. Sante kept his promise. The bad man isn't going to bother us anymore." It was true. Detective Chun had called 2 days ago to inform her that Marcus had withdrawn his complaint and left the state. There would be no further investigation, no CPS involvement, no consequences for Vanna's supposed criminal associations. Sante had fixed it, just like he'd promised, and he'd done it without making things worse. She should have felt relief. Instead, she just felt empty. "Then why are you sad?" Zara persisted. "How did you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes the person who saves you is also the person you have to walk away from? That safety and love don't always exist in the same space. That choosing to protect your child sometimes means denying yourself the one thing that makes you feel alive? It's complicated, sweetheart. Do you miss him?" The simple question, asked with such innocent directness, shattered what was left of Vanna's composure. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Yeah, baby, I do." Zara hugged her mother tight, small arms wrapping around Vanna's neck with fierce love. "Then why don't you see him anymore? He was nice. He made you smile. He made you not scared. Sometimes being with someone, even if they're nice, can be complicated." "That's silly," Zara pronounced with the absolute certainty of childhood. "If someone makes you happy, you should be with them. That's not complicated. If only it were that simple." Vanna got Zara settled with dinner and a movie, then retreated to her bedroom, closing the door and sitting on the edge of her bed in the growing darkness. Her phone sat on the nightstand, silent and accusatory. She turned off notifications days ago, unable to bear the constant temptation to check if he'd texted, if he'd called, if he'd broken the promise to give her space. He hadn't. For days of absolute silence. For days of him respecting her boundaries, even though it was clearly killing them both. She picked up the phone, her fingers hovering over his contact. She could call. could tell him she'd made a mistake, that these 4 days had taught her that being safe without him was worse than being at risk with him, could surrender to the pull that had been growing stronger with every hollow hour. But then what? She'd go back to his penthouse, back to his world, and all the fear she'd voiced would still be there, waiting. The danger, the complications, the reality that loving a man like Sante Costa meant accepting a life she'd never wanted. Her phone buzzed in her hand, making her jump. A text from Sante, the first communication in 4 days. Her heart hammered as she opened it. I miss you. Tell me how to fix this. 5 simple words that contained everything. His loneliness, his desperation, his willingness to do whatever it took to bridge the distance between them. Vanna stared at the message, her vision blurring with tears. Tell him how to fix it, as if there were easy answers, as if love alone could solve the fundamental incompatibility of their lives. Her fingers moved across the screen before she could overthink it. I miss you too, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to reconcile who you are with what I need. The response came within seconds. Then let me show you. Let me prove I can be what you need. Ow, give me a chance. One more chance. Let me take you somewhere. Just you. Tomorrow night. No expectations. Just let me try. Vanna closed her eyes, feeling the war inside her between caution and longing, between protecting herself and taking a risk that might destroy her or save her. Where? My place. But not the penthouse. Somewhere I haven't shown anyone. Somewhere that's just mine. The vulnerability in that offer made her chest ache. He was giving her access to something private, something real, something beyond the expensive facade of his public life. What time? 7. I'll send a car. I'll take the bus. A pause, longer this time. She could almost feel his frustration through the screen, his need to provide for her, to make things easier, warring with his understanding that she needed to maintain some independence. Okay, I'll text you the address. Vanna set the phone down and buried her face in her hands. 4 days of hollow misery. 4 days of telling herself she was making the right choice by staying away, and one text from him had crumbled her resolve like it was made of paper. Zara was right. If someone made you happy, being with them shouldn't be complicated. But it was so complicated. She thought about the way Sante had looked at her daughter, the tenderness in his voice when he'd spoken to Zara, the promise in his eyes when he'd said he'd keep them safe. She thought about the way he'd held her in her tiny apartment, 2 people from different worlds finding shelter in each other. She thought about how he'd confessed that she made him feel alive, made him want to be better. And she thought about Detective Chen's warning, about Marcus's false accusations, about the very real dangers that came with loving a man who lived in shadows. Her phone buzzed again. Thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. Vanna's fingers hovered over the keyboard, 1,000 responses fighting for space. In the end, she typed the only truth that mattered. I'm scared. I know. I am too. But Vanna, I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. And tomorrow, I want to show you that maybe we can have both. She didn't respond. Couldn't find words adequate for the storm of emotions churning inside her. Instead, she lay back on her bed, phone clutched to her chest, and let herself feel the first stirring of hope in 4 hollow days. Maybe he was right. Maybe they could find a way to have both safety and love, distance and connection, separate worlds and a shared future. Or maybe tomorrow would just confirm what she already feared, that some distances were too great to bridge, no matter how much you wanted to. Either way, she'd know, one way or another. Tomorrow would give her the answer she'd been searching for in 4 days of miserable silence. The hollow feeling in her chest shifted slightly, making room for something fragile and tentative. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, essential hope. Vanna fell asleep with her phone still clutched in her hand, dreams filled with possibilities she was afraid to examine too closely. She woke to pounding on her apartment door at 2 in the morning, her heart lurching into her throat as she stumbled out of bed. Her first thought was Marcus, that somehow he'd come back despite Sante's assurances that the nightmare was starting again. She grabbed her phone, finger hovering over 911 as she approached the door. Vanna. The voice was muffled but unmistakable. Please. I know you said tomorrow, but I can't. I need to see you now. Sante. She looked through the peephole and barely recognized him. His hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead in messy waves. His shirt was wrinkled, untucked, the top buttons undone. He looked like he'd been pacing for hours, running his hands through his hair, slowly unraveling. Vanna unlocked the door, opening it just enough to see him fully. It's 2 a.m. Zara's asleep. You can't. I know. I'm sorry. I tried to wait. His eyes were wild, desperate. Nothing like the control man she'd come to know. I sat in my car outside your building for 3 hours, trying to convince myself to drive away, to give you the space you asked for, to wait until tomorrow like we agreed. He took a shaking breath. I can't. I can't wait. I can't spend another hour in that hollow place knowing you're here. So close, and I'm not allowed to. He stopped, his jaw clenching as he visibly fought for control. Vanna glanced back at Zara's closed bedroom door, then stepped into the hallway, pulling her door mostly closed behind her. She wore only an oversized t-shirt and sleep shorts, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, no armor between her and whatever was about to happen. You promised, she said quietly. You promised to give me time. I know, and I'm breaking that promise because I realized something tonight. He moved closer, and she could smell the faint scent of whiskey on his breath, could see the raw vulnerability in his eyes. I've spent my entire adult life being disciplined, controlled. I built an empire on my ability to be patient, to wait for the right moment, to never let emotion dictate my actions. Sante, but with you, I can't be that person. You're my weakness, Vanna. You're the only thing in this world that makes me reckless and desperate and completely out of control. His hand lifted, fingers trembling slightly as they traced the line of her jaw. And I realized that's not a flaw. It's not something I need to overcome. It's what makes me human again. Vanna's breath caught. You're drunk. 1 drink. 2, maybe. Enough to give me the courage to break my promise and show up at your door in the middle of the night like a desperate fool. A broken laugh escaped him. Do you know what I've been doing for 4 days? Sitting in that empty penthouse, staring at the flowers you arranged weeks ago because I can't bring myself to throw them out even though they're dead. Sleeping in my office because my bed smells like you and I can't stand to lie there alone. Counting the hours until Tuesday, knowing you wouldn't be there. The Marcus situation is handled completely. He's gone. The complaint is withdrawn. The detective has closed the case. You're safe. Zara's safe. I kept that promise even if I couldn't keep the one about giving you space. His thumb brushed across her bottom lip. But I need you to understand something. I can't live safely without you. That doesn't make sense. It does. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Before you, I was just existing, going through motions, building wealth and power because I didn't know what else to do with my life. I was safe because I had nothing worth risking, nothing worth protecting, nothing to lose. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. Now I have everything to lose. You, the possibility of us, the dream of a family, a home, something real. And that makes me vulnerable in ways I've never been vulnerable before. Vanna's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. Sante, I told you I needed time to think. I know what you're going to decide. His hands framed her face, holding her gently but firmly, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're going to choose safety. You're going to choose the life you know, the life where you're in control, where you don't have to trust someone else to protect you and your daughter. And I understand that. I do. But before you make that choice, I need you to know something. What? I'm walking away from it all. The empire, the criminal connections, the dangerous life you're so afraid of. The words came out fierce, absolute. I've already started the process. Selling off the questionable businesses, cutting ties with certain associates, transitioning everything to legitimate operations. It'll take time, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but I'm doing it. Vanna stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. You can't just. I can. I am. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. You asked me how to fix this. That's how. I'm choosing you over everything I built. I'm choosing the possibility of a normal life with you and Zara over the power and control I thought I needed. What if it doesn't work? What if you give up everything and I still can't do this? Pain flashed across his features. Then at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll know I became the man you deserved, even if I couldn't have you. Tears spilled down Vanna's cheeks, hot and unstoppable. You're asking me to trust you with everything. I know. You're asking me to believe that you can really walk away from that life. I'm not asking you to believe. I'm asking you to watch me do it, to give me the time to prove it. He pulled back slightly, reaching into his pocket. But first, I'm asking you something else. Vanna's breath stopped as he pulled out a small velvet box. I know this is insane, Sante said, his voice shaking. I know we've known each other for barely any time at all. I know you probably think I've lost my mind, showing up here at 2 in the morning with a ring. He opened the box, revealing a simple band with a single diamond, elegant and understated. But Vanna, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're what I want. You and Zara, a family, a home, a life that means something beyond wealth and power. Sante, her voice came out as barely a whisper. I'm not asking you to say yes right now. I'm asking for maybe. He took her left hand, his fingers gentle around her wrist, carefully avoiding the fading bruises. I'm asking you to wear this ring and let me spend the next 6 months proving I can be the man you need. Let me show you I can build a legitimate life. Let me show you that choosing me doesn't mean choosing danger. Just give me a maybe. Vanna looked down at the ring, then up at his face, seeing everything there. The desperation, the love, the absolute conviction that she was worth remaking his entire existence for. And she thought about 4 hollow days. About Zara asking why she didn't smile anymore. About the way this man had seen her when everyone else looked through her. About how he'd made her feel alive and precious and worthy of more than just survival. She thought about all the reasons to say no, about the risks and the complications and the 1,000 ways this could destroy everything she'd built. And then she thought about hope. Dangerous, terrifying, essential hope. Ask me, she whispered. Sante's eyes widened. What? Ask me properly. Not for maybe. Ask me the real question. His hands shook as he took the ring from the box, holding it the entrance to her finger. Vanna Siciliano, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice? Will you let me be the man who keeps you and Zara safe, who makes you smile, who sees you every single day and never stops being grateful that you chose to be seen? The answer came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that knew the difference between existing and living, between safety and love. Yes, the word hung in the air between them for one perfect moment before Sante slid the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home and taking flight all at once. Desperate and gentle, fierce and tender, a promise sealed with the kind of certainty that made everything else fade into insignificance. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vanna kept her arms wrapped around his neck, afraid that if she let go, the moment would dissolve like a dream. You said yes, he murmured against her hair, wonder in his voice. You actually said yes. I said yes, she confirmed, then pulled back to look at him seriously. But Sante, if you're lying to me, if you're not really walking away from that life. I'm not lying. I swear on everything I have, everything I am, I'm not lying. He pressed his forehead to hers again. You and Zara are my life now. Everything else is just details to be handled. We need to tell Zara. Together. In the morning, when she's awake. Together, he agreed. As a family. The word settled over them like a benediction. Family. Home. The things they'd both been searching for without knowing it. Found in each other in the most unlikely of places. Vanna's apartment door opened, and they both turned to see Zara, standing there in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mama, why are you in the hallway? Then she saw Sante, and a smile broke across her face. Mr. Sante, you came back. I came back, he confirmed, crouching down to her level. Is that okay with you? Zara looked between them, her gaze landing on the ring on her mother's finger. Did you ask her to marry you? Vanna laughed through fresh tears. Yes, baby. He did. And you said yes? I said yes. Zara launched herself at Sante, wrapping her small arms around his neck with the absolute trust of a child who knew she was safe. Good, because Mama smiles when you're here, and you promise to keep us safe, and I think you should live with us. Sante's arms came around the little girl, and when he looked up at Vanna, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. If your mama says it's okay, I'd like that very much. And standing in the shabby hallway of her run-down apartment building at 2 in the morning, wearing a sleep shirt and an engagement ring, with her daughter in the arms of a man who'd chosen to remake his world for them, Vanna felt something shift into place. Not safety, not certainty, but something better. Love. Real, complicated, terrifying, essential love. And for the first time in her life, she chose it. Sante carried Zara back into the apartment, Vanna following close behind, closing the door on the shabby hallway and the life she'd known before. He settled on the sagging couch with Zara still in his arms, the little girl looking up at him with those two knowing eyes. "You're really going to be my daddy?" she asked. The question simple, but weighted with everything a 6-year-old understood about broken promises and disappearing fathers. Sante's expression grew serious, solemn, as if he understood the gravity of what she was asking. "Not your daddy. You have a father, even if he hasn't been here for you the way he should have been. But I'd like to be your family. Someone who will always be here. Someone who will never leave. People always say they won't leave." Zara's voice was small. "But they do. I know, sweetheart. And I know you don't have any reason to believe me yet." Sante glanced at Vanna, then back to the child in his arms. "But I'm making you a promise right now. The same promise I just made to your mama. I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life showing you that I mean what I say. What if you get mad? What if mama makes you angry?" Vanna's heart clenched at the question, at the fear beneath it. Marcus had been volatile, his moods unpredictable, and even though Zara had been so young when he left, she'd absorbed those patterns of instability. "Then your mama, and I will talk about it. We might argue sometimes, because that's what people who love each other do. But I will never hurt her. I will never hurt you. And I will never leave because things get difficult." Sante's hand smoothed over Zara's braids with infinite gentleness. "You know what makes a family, Zara? Not just love. Showing up. Every single day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. You promise?" "I promise. Cross my heart." He made the gesture, drawing an X over his chest, and something in Zara's expression softened. She turned to look at her mother. "Are you sure, Mama? Are you sure he's a good one?" Vanna moved to sit beside them on the couch, her hand finding Sante's. "I'm sure, baby. I'm more sure about this than I've been about anything in a long time." Zara nodded slowly, then nestled deeper into Sante's embrace, her small hand reaching out to touch the ring on Vanna's finger. "It's pretty. Like Mama. Your mama is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," Sante said, his eyes finding Vanna's over their daughter's head. Their daughter. The possessive already felt natural, right? Inside and out. And I'm the luckiest man alive that she said yes. "Can we have a big wedding? With a cake? And can I be a flower girl?" Vanna laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. "We can have whatever kind of wedding you want, baby. And we'll live together? All of us." "All of us," Sante confirmed. "Though we might need to find a bigger place than this apartment on my penthouse. Somewhere that feels like home for all three of us. With a yard." Zara's eyes lit up. "I've always wanted a yard. With grass and maybe a swing set." "Whatever you want, sweetheart." Sante looked at Vanna. "Whatever makes this family happy." They sat like that for a long time, the three of them on the worn couch in the tiny apartment, talking about the future in whispers so as not to disturb the neighbors. Zara eventually fell asleep between them, her breathing deep and peaceful, more relaxed than Vanna had seen her in weeks. Sante carefully lifted the little girl, following Vanna into the small bedroom and laying her gently in bed. They stood together in the doorway, watching her sleep, and Vanna felt Sante's arm come around her waist. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For choosing me. For trusting me with her. With both of you." He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face in that gesture that had become so familiar. "You're my whole world, Vanna. You and Zara. Everything I do from this moment forward is for you." "That's a lot of pressure," she said, but she was smiling. It's not pressure. It's purpose. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips, soft and sweet and full of promise. I've been looking for purpose my whole life. And I found it in a woman who hums Etta James and arranges flowers and makes me feel human again. I love you, Vanna said, the words feeling less terrifying now, more like coming home. I love you too. So much it scares me. Good, she murmured against his lips. We can be scared together. 3 years later, Vanna stood in the kitchen of their home, a sprawling house in the hills with the yard and swing set Zara had dreamed of. Sun streamed through the windows, warming the granite countertops and custom cabinets, and she could hear her daughter's laughter from outside, where Sante was pushing her on the swing he'd installed himself. The house was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't the house that made a home. It was the sound of that laughter. The photos on the walls showing their small family growing over 3 years. The ring on her finger, now accompanied by a wedding band. The business cards stacked neatly on the counter bearing the name Siciliano Costa Home Services, the cleaning company she'd built with Sante's support, but her own vision. Elite Cleaning Services was a distant memory. Now she owned her own business, employed 15 women like herself, women who'd been invisible and were learning to be seen. She still cleaned sometimes, but now it was by choice, not necessity. Now she spent most of her time managing, training, building something that was entirely hers. Sante had kept every promise. The transition from his old life had taken 18 months, longer than he'd anticipated but thorough. He now ran a portfolio of legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate investments, a venture capital firm that funded small businesses in underserved communities. The penthouse had been sold. The dangerous connections had been severed. He'd built something new, something clean, something he could be proud of. He was different now, softer in some ways, harder in others. He smiled more, laughed more, came home every evening at a reasonable hour because he'd promised Zara he'd never miss dinner. On Sundays, they went to church because Vanna's faith mattered and Sante was learning to find his own. Mama, Zara burst through the back door, now 9 years old and all limbs and energy. Dad says we can get a puppy if you say yes. Dad, not Mr. Sante, not stepdad, just Dad. Sante had formally adopted Zara 6 months after the wedding, and Marcus had signed away his rights without argument. Some money had changed hands, Vanna knew, but she'd stopped asking about those details. Some battles weren't worth fighting. A puppy is a big responsibility, Vanna said, but she was already smiling, already knowing she'd say yes. Sante appeared in the doorway behind their daughter, his hair slightly mussed from the wind, wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of the expensive suits he used to live in. He looked younger now, happier, free. I told her we had to ask you first, he said, moving to wrap his arms around Vanna from behind, pressing a kiss to her neck. Because you're the boss of this family. I thought we were co-bosses, Vanna teased. You're the CEO. I'm just the CFO. He rested his chin on her shoulder. So, can we get a puppy? Zara bounced on her toes. Please, Mama. I promise I'll walk it and feed it and everything. Vanna looked at her daughter's bright eyes, at her husband's hopeful expression, at the life they'd built together against all odds and reason. Okay, we can get a puppy. Zara's squeal of delight was deafening as she threw herself at both of them, creating a tangle of arms and laughter in the sunny kitchen. Sante's arms tightened around Vanna, and she felt him smile against her hair. Thank you, he murmured, so quiet only she could hear. For the puppy? For this. All of it. For saying yes 3 years ago when every logical bone in your body was screaming at you to run. Vanna turned in his arms, cupping his face between her hands, seeing the man he'd become reflected in his dark eyes. The dangerous edge was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it was tempered now by softness, by love, by the daily choice to be gentle instead of ruthless. I'd say yes again, she told him. Every single day, I'd say yes. His kiss was answer enough, promise enough, home enough. Later that evening, after Zara had gone to bed clutching a library book about puppy care, Vanna and Sante sat on their back patio, watching the city lights twinkle below. He held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, a gesture so familiar it felt like breathing. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Walking away from everything you built?" Sante was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, the clear rules, the absolute control." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the soft patio lights. "But then I come home to you and Zara, and I remembered that what I have now is worth 1,000 empires. I didn't lose anything, Vanna. I gained everything." "We're not perfect," she said. "We still argue about money sometimes, about how to discipline Zara, about my mother coming to visit for 3 weeks. Perfect is boring." He pulled her closer until she was tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder. "We're real. We're messy. We're complicated. And we're home. Home." The words settled over her like a benediction, just as it had 3 years ago in the hallway of her shabby apartment. She was no longer invisible, no longer just surviving, no longer afraid of being seen. She was Vanna Siciliano Costa, wife, mother, business owner, a woman who'd chosen love over safety and found that sometimes, when you're brave enough to be seen, you discover that being seen is the safest place of all. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." Sante's arms tightened around her. "My whole world. Yesterday, today, always." And in the quiet of their home, with their daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs and a future full of puppy chaos ahead of them, Vanna finally understood what it meant to be perfectly seen, perfectly loved, perfectly home. The bandage on her face all those years ago had been just another detail Sante could have ignored. Instead, he'd chosen to see, and in seeing her, he'd save them both.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.